Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. It is officially football season, so we are back to our regularly scheduled programming, and I'm delighted to say, let's get into it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young at heart. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
That's right, it is officially football season. It feels like we have been waiting forever for this moment, but in just 3 short days, NFL is going to be back with us. We are into week 1. We are back to our normal show sheet, our normal programming, and it's just the two of us today, but it is the best two. So, Paul, delighted to have you with me. It's boys hour, as we were saying before the show. How are you doing? You excited for week 1?
Oh, man, I'm over the moon. I love it because we've spent the whole off season talking about players we like, players we dislike, things that we do, and now it all sort of comes together and it's like, right, let's see who's going to make it, who's not going to make it, and get all our questions answered, everything that we've spoke about. Now we finally get the answers. And we go back to setting 1 million lineups on a Sunday and 1 million waivers on a Tuesday and all the leagues that we commission and everything, sorting all that out. So it's exciting. Do you know what? It's exciting to be back. It's so good to be back. It's so good to have ball to chat about and not preseason garbage where we see third string players go in and they make a catch and everyone's like, oh my God, he's amazing. Let's put him wide receiver 1 or something, So it's going to be wicked.
Never going to do anything in the league. I did actually go through my lineups earlier today and just set everything roughly where I think it's going to be. And as I was doing it, I sort of had that blinking feeling of when you're like, well, I only did one dynasty startup at a time, but that one dynasty startup at a time added sort of 5 to 7 leagues on top of my existing 15 to 20 leagues. And I was like, oh, in season is going to be a bit of a slog when it comes to setting lineups. How many leagues do you think you're playing in this year?
Oh, I've cut it down a lot this year, to be fair. It's one of them where I felt like last year was a bit of a slog, especially towards like the end of the season. It was all getting a bit thing. And so I've cut it down this season. I've got a lot of best ball, but I'd say I'm probably in about 25, something like that.
That's very entertaining because I think a lot of people would see 25 and go, oh my God, that's a lot of leagues. Whereas to people like us, you're like, oh, you've done a good job cutting down.
Yeah. So I speak to a lot of people and I've got a lot of friends and I play in a couple of leagues with like local lads and stuff. And I'll go out for beers with them on Sundays or whatever, if I can. And I speak to them and they're like, oh yeah, I've got 2 leagues going on and this guy's doing well and that guy's doing really well. And I'm like, I don't really look at who, and they're like, don't you just, and I'm like, no, I don't look at anyone because I've got 25 leagues. And they're like, what? You got 25 leagues? How do you have time? And I'm like, I've cut it down, okay? And I know there's people out there that are like listening to me say 25 and people are going, what? That's crazy. You've got a lot of leagues. But there's also people listening and going, shit, 25 would be a nice number to play with on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And like I said, because I've got best balls, I'd say maybe about 50% of them are best balls. So I've only actually got maybe 13 to 15 sort of leagues where I have to set lineups every week. And still that, like you said, that's a bit of a slog, but I'm guessing you're the same as me. You've got that sort of process where on a Sunday you go through things, you're looking at starters, and it was really well. So my son's changed swimming clubs, and he used to train at 1, and they trained 4:30 till 6 on a Sunday. So literally on a Sunday, I was sat there poolside, and I was waiting for all these notifications, and it was like, right, he's out. Go through all my leagues, find out where they are, move this, move that, and I had so much time to play with that it was actually really well. But he hasn't got that this year, but so. I'll figure it out.
You'll have to free up the time. What's your thoughts before we crack on with sort of more of the meat of the show? We were talking about sort of leagues that we commission this off season. Obviously, we both do a fair amount. You have the big Champions League, which I know takes up a significant amount of time. I have a fair share of dynasty leagues. What's your thoughts on the sleeper auto sub feature that they introduced this off season?
I really like it.
Yeah.
And I think it benefits us in the UK more because not so much a Sunday at 6 o'clock, when them games kick off, that's fine. But for somebody who works a job where I am up early, so, if I'm up early on a Monday and I could be in work by 3 o'clock on a Monday morning, I'm going to bed, sort of 8:30 on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I missed that period where it's like this player was questionable. I'd gone to bed and then he was out. So I really like it, to be fair. I really like it. I've got a lot of time for it. As somebody in the UK, especially, like I said, with that, where you can miss that notification,
Yeah.
or even so much on a Thursday night football where, the games kick off at 20 past 1 in the morning for us, our time. So, if they're not saying they're out till midnight or something like that, I've got sleeper going off in the back if anyone heard that, if it's like 12:30 at night and you're getting that notification to say this player that was questionable is out and you miss it, we've got the opportunity to put something in place that covers that if they are out, So what do you think? You like it?
I agree with you, and I like it in theory. I'm actually not introducing it in a huge amount of my leagues that I commission, which I realize at this point is over half of the leagues that I'm in that I run myself. Just because I'm nervous of Sleeper launching a new feature, and I'm nervous of the way in which it's actually going to work in reality, and that they're going to find a way for it to not work perfectly and for it to be buggy and it to end up sort of presenting more issues than it actually fixes. So it's not that I don't like the idea. I just would
like Sleeper.
I get nervous about. I like Sleeper as an interface, but I think that sometimes when they launch new things, like if you played the Premier League Fantasy, it's so buggy immediately, like it just doesn't work. And so I think I'm just worried about them messing up the launch of it. So I think it's more of a case of I would rather spend half a season watching other commissioners figure out how to use it, and then if leagues want it, I'll bring it in. Although I have in most leagues, I have put it to a vote and sort of said, look, I'm not 100% sure, but if people outrageously want this thing, then I will bring this thing in. I would almost rather do it manually and have someone say, look, this player's questionable. I've agreed with my opponent. Can you switch them out my lineup if they don't play afterwards, and just have it done a bit more manually? Just because, yeah, I think new features on Sleeper worry me a little bit.
Yeah, that's sort of something we've done in sort of like one of the home leagues I play in with a lot of guys. It was always one of them where if 12:30 on a Thursday night, somebody that's questionable is out, then have that opportunity to bring that other person in, and it's all decided before the game starts anyway, and agreed by both people that are playing in that game that week. But I just think it's a nice feature. But I totally get, and I have seen it with Sleeper where that it does get quite buggy and it can be a bit of a letdown sometimes, but it's still better than MFL.
It's so much better than MFL. Let's
people are
going
to get outraged by them comments as well. We're probably going to get some Twitter hate.
Just Murph is going to get outraged by that comment. He's the only person that likes MFL that I know. Let's crack on into our big news of the week. And I'm afraid it's not a particularly happy one this time. So Ricky Pearsall, the first round rookie from the 49ers, was shot over the last few days in the chest. Obviously incredibly sad, but delighted to see that he's been released from hospital and is in serious but stable condition. Now, this is actually the third offseason in a row that a skill position rookie has been the victim of a shooting in the offseason. We obviously had Brian Robinson, then Tank Dell, now Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, with him, it being in the chest probably presents more of an issue. So we don't want to think about the sort of the side products of it, but obviously it does have a fantasy impact. The main thing is that we're absolutely delighted to see that he is okay and that he survived. And that's the most important thing. But obviously there is a fantasy football impact to talk about as well. So he was obviously slated to probably be the third string wide receiver on the 49ers. Now, the 49ers offseason at wide receiver was ended up differently to how we predicted. We thought Debo could get traded. We thought Ayuk could get traded. Neither of that happened. Is there anyone that you're looking at to potentially target who could get some volume off the back of Ricky Pearsall missing some time, or do you think this doesn't really affect your fantasy mindset?
I don't think this really affects the fantasy implications for me. I think for me, he was always, I know we say he's the third choice wide receiver there, but I think he's probably the fifth choice target with the likes of Debo, Brandon Ayuk now signing a contract with CMC and George Kittle. I think all four of them players would be targeted before him. So actually, you're going, how much fantasy impact is he going to have as the fifth choice? And do I think somebody's going to step into that role? Is it going to be, is it going to be anything? And you'd sort of say at best maybe a flex, but I don't think he would have ever really done anything much than that. And I don't think there's anyone I'd really target on that team now. I think I'm quite happy with. I'd rather take the other four and not have the headache of who else. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think the thing is, Ricky Pearsall was an interesting fantasy pick in the offseason in sort of best ball and early redraft leagues because we thought Brandon Ayuk might get traded. He then signed a gigantic extension. So you probably don't want to target, as you say, the fifth option in San Francisco. So yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. The other thing that I just wanted to ask before we get in fully to the show is what your plan is for week one, where you're going to be watching on Sunday, whether you've got, how are you going to be celebrating the return of the NFL to our lives?
I'm going to be celebrating by driving home from my son's club championship competition that finishes at about 5:45 on Sunday night. And it's
oh no,
good half an hour, 40-minute drive. So by the time he's out of the pool and he's got dressed and everything like this, and we leave him, it's probably going to be about 6:30 by the time I'm home. And then it's probably going to be a nice Chinese takeaway and a couple of beers. And I'm probably going to end up waiting until about 9:00 when the wife goes to bed, and then it'll be sit down, get my snack helmet out, fill it with crisps, chocolates, and Maltesers, and just sit there and just be really, really like a typical American. I'm going to sit here, eat some snacks, and watch some ball, But until about 9:00, I'm going to be disturbed and kids and everything like that. So, but I have got Monday off this week, so that's a bonus.
I can definitely empathize more with you when you're not training for a marathon. And it's sort of snacks and beers and Chinese takeaways than London Marathon, Paul.
Than a Caesar salad and a protein shake or something like that. You know? And it's like early bed and maybe doing some stretches while the game's going on or something like that. So
no,
it's all about snacks and crap. Eat loads of crap. Eat loads of biscuits and stuff like that.
That's the plan. Yeah, I've got my best friend down. I've got my best friend down. We're obviously in a new flat now, but the missus is away because she's going on holiday with her family or with her parents, and I'm joining them for week 2. So I got my best friend down for the weekend. My brother's also going to come round on the Sunday. I'm going to cook a massive roast dinner, and we're going to settle in for 7 hours of commercial-free football, and I am absolutely buzzing for it.
No, I can't wait. I can't. And I'm going to miss him say that this week, and that depresses me.
I'll record it and send it to you. I'll FaceTime you when it goes on or something.
Oh, mate, I can't wait. I can't wait. Just driving home and all I get is loads of videos of people going 7 hours of commercial-free football. I'm like, I hate you all. I genuinely hate you.
Well, you'll get maybe 5.5 hours of commercial-free football.
Yeah, something like that.
That'll work. So let's crack on into our into the meat of the show. So for anyone that joined us during the off season that hasn't listened previously, we are going back into our regular in season show schedule, which is basically 4 main sections. I'll tell you about the other 3 later when we get to them. But what we normally start to do with our rewind title. Is to look back to the week before and think about something that we learned that's going to make us a better fantasy player for the week ahead or for the rest of the season in general. But to do this for this week, obviously we're previewing week 1, but there wasn't a week 0. And I don't want to say what we learned from the preseason, because what we learned from the preseason is always nothing. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take back just briefly to last season and to have a think about what did we learn from last year that we want to take into the season with us. We have also got for all of the segments on the show, we've got input from Hannah as well. So I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to start off by telling us Hannah's. I want to keep yours for last because you've got a surprise answer listed.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so Hannah's answer was to work the waiver wire early and often. Don't be scared. This is your chance to get a Puka Nakua. I absolutely love this because this is something that happens every year. And we've seen it many times and we will see it again. There will be somebody that nobody has seen, nobody's picked up, especially in redraft. You know, dynasty leagues are a lot deeper. You won't really see much. But in redraft, there is always somebody out there that will shine, and you need to be the person that gets that person. Like Hannah's given you the Puka Nakua. I'm trying to think of somebody else that did it a couple of years. Was it James Robinson? James Robinson was the waiver wire guy and stuff. And there is always somebody that is on the waiver wire. And I learned this a couple of years back, and I know we're going to mention him again, but Murph was the one that told me this. Like, you know, you stay active in your league and you've got a very, very good chance of doing better than most, because you've got to be there. You've got to be on the waiver wire. You know, a lot of the time you find the team that you drafted is not the team that you finish with and the team that you win with and stuff like this. So it is one of them where you've got to play the waiver wire. You've got to, you know, you've got to do that. And I love that. Do you agree with Hannah? Because I do, weirdly.
Definitely, and I often think back, particularly at the tight end position. And obviously we had Sam Laporta last season finish as a tight end 1, and he was probably going undrafted in a lot of leagues. But I always think back to, you know, Mark Andrews' breakout season, I think, was either 2018 or 2019. The year after was Darren Waller available off waivers. Like, there's often these players that are league winners, whether or not they're, you know, I don't like sort of saying that the next Puka Nakua, if you're looking at sort of the specifics of the rookie 5th round sensation that becomes the greatest rookie of all time. But I do like saying the next Puka Nakua if you're going, there is someone out there that we're not talking about who is going to win fantasy leagues. And I definitely think, like, being active early, you know, the thing to think about with your fab dollars, you don't get added points at the end of the season if you don't spend them all. And you're much more likely to find that player on waivers early on than you are later in the season. By the end of the season, we have all of the information in front of us. At the beginning of the season, there's players who are getting roles that we haven't learned about yet. So we're going to see week 1. I mean, think with Kyron Williams as well. You know, we thought it was Cam Akers who was going in the 3rd round. Sean McVay knew the whole time that it probably wasn't going to be Cam Akers and that he preferred Kyron. The information is there. We just don't know it yet. So I think definitely the point about working the waiver wire early and sort of being willing to spend a significant amount of your budget early on is a really smart thing to do. Mine is,
don't blow your load too early.
Don't never blow your load too early. It's the man show.
I was talking about fab. I don't know what you were talking about, Lewis. But also,
Nothing.
I love the fact that we're 18 minutes in. You've got to speak about Puka. You've told us that no one is ever going to be as good as Puka, basically. And do you know what? I'm just going to say this now. I wish my wife spoke about me the way that you speak about Puka. Okay? I genuinely, I'm just saying it, okay? Hannah brought up Puka, and you were like, I bet your eyes lit up when you read the show sheet. You're like, Puka's name's on there. I get to talk about him. No one's ever going to be as good as Puka.
I have had, obviously I started up the YouTube last week, and the amount of people that have come back to me and been like, you have mentioned Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup in all 3 episodes so far.
And they call me a homer.
I'm on brand.
You know what I mean? They call me a homer.
Well, my next bit is kind of slightly contrary to Hannah's and almost slightly Puka Nakua related, which is basically you need to learn that next year is not going to be exactly the same as the year that that preceded it. And what I mean here is that we as fancy analysts work in predictions. And I often reference the fact that the biggest indicator of future fantasy performance is previous fantasy performance. But the whole point here is that it's not the only indicator of future fantasy performance. So I think a lot of the time we go in and we say, well, this worked last year, so this is going to work, the year ahead as well. And that thing about, looking at rookies on the waiver wire or looking at particular players that flopped last year or thinking about the way in which you won your league last year, strategies change every single season. And it's a case that, I spent a lot, for a while, the fantasy community was very against early quarterback. We basically went in saying, you need to draft a quarterback as late as possible. It doesn't matter. And now I'm really happy going out and targeting one of those top guys because I think there's such a gulf between the two. The same with tight end. I always used to punt tight end right till the end. And now I basically look and say, I want one of those sort of top 5 or 6 guys. And I think it's a case of going, just because something worked last year, it's continual data gathering, but it's not entirely predictive of what's going to happen in front of you. So I think it's a case of like learning from the year before, but making sure that that doesn't comprise 100% of your learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. It totally does. And I completely agree with both of you. But are you ready for my answer?
I'm very excited for your surprise answer.
Okay, so I've got 2. I have got 2, and I'll save the surprise one for after. But my first one, my more serious one, is never be afraid to shoot your shot. Then, because most of the time we can all overthink things, overanalyze things, and look at this, look at that, and stuff like this. But if you think that's your guy, go and get them. If they're on the waiver wire or anything like that, trust your instincts. There'll be so many times this season or so many times last season where you get to a Sunday night and you're going, do I pick player A or player B? I love player A, but I'm not sure about. Trust your gut. Go with player A. Always go with what your gut's saying and what your gut's feeling. You can overthink things, and don't be caught up in it all. Sort of, if you miss, you miss. If you hit, you hit. That's the way you've got to look at it. You've got to look at it and think, do you know what? This is my shot. This is what I'm going to have a go with, and never be afraid to do it that way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think that there's something very important about making sure that you go and get your guy in fantasy football. I think especially if you have an instinct, one of the worst things that can happen is seeing someone break out on someone else's team that you thought you knew they were going to break out. If you were, one of the guys that looked at Sam Laporta and thought, there's volume here. They're struggling at wide receiver too, and I think he's a good player. And you watched him be a league winner. Oh my God, that must have sucked if it was on someone else's team to yours. But I do want to hear more about the surprise answer. Stop teasing with that one.
So the surprise answer. So what I've learned from last year, and this may shock you, but what I learned from last year is listen to what Hannah says, because most of the time she's fucking right.
Why do you only say that on the episode where she's not here?
Well, I was hoping she'd be here for that because I thought she'd absolutely love it. And I'm hoping she listens and she does actually love it. But it annoys me. But 9 times out of 10, she's right. Okay. So don't listen to what I have to say. Listen to what Hannah says.
Yeah. Aside from, she's a bit blinded by her love for Kate Otten, but the rest of her takes are genuinely pretty good.
I'm not even lying, Lewis. I reckon Kate Otten is one of the most drafted players I've got this year. Okay, I've just gone, let's get Kate Otten everywhere. Like as a late round tight end, I've just gone, Kate Otten. Hannah loves him. He's going to my team. And I did this a year before with Max. So Max told me, Dwayne McBride, he's going to be amazing. I was like, right, Max, I love you. You're amazing. I'm going to draft so much. I actually looked, and he was my most rostered player because I drafted so much Dwayne McBride. At the end of like every rookie draft, startup draft, everything, like, bam, bam, Dwayne McBride. He got cut this year.
Did he actually?
Yeah, he actually got cut. they genuinely, the Vikings actually cut him. So
I think it says a lot when you get players that people like us don't actually know what team they're on or like where they are at this point. I had it when I was recording the episode about the YouTube episode about Cooper Cup that also was about Drake London, when I was talking through and I was like, at wide receiver 2 they've got Darnell Mooney, at wide receiver 3 it was Rondell Moore, but he got injured, so the wide receiver 3 is now. And I was like, oh wow, it says a lot if I have absolutely no idea what other wide receivers are on that team.
yeah. And for those that are playing the Lewis drinking game, he's mentioned Cooper Cup again.
You shouldn't play a Cooper Cup drinking game listening to me, because you'll just get absolutely rat-arsed.
2 fingers.
That's a nice little segue into sort of the main feature of the show, because I want to talk about having a competition. So each week we have 3 regular features, which is a little bit more in depth than sort of regular start sits, because we wanted to do something slightly different. So what we do is a stud, a scare, and a wild card. And the stud is about finding an under the radar player that we think is going to smash the week ahead. Preferably someone on waivers if possible, but someone that you can go out and target to start next week. Doing start sits and looking and going, you should start CD Lamb this week. It's just not good content. And then the same with scare. So we want to try and find a hyped up player that we think is going to underperform. So, warning you off where you should potentially be targeting matchups a little more, or where there's injury information you might have missed, kind of helping you win by looking at where you actually could be warned about your studs. And then we look for a wild card, which is purely what's a strange thing that we think is going to happen this week, and really the roguer the better. Now, we'd spoken about having a competition with these, because what we'll always do is when we do the next week's episode, we reflect back on how we did before we do our predictions for the week ahead. And I think this season it would be great to do a proper competition. And my suggestion is that we essentially score it like golf. So you do it where the higher points is the worse. So we will pick a loser from each category each week who was the most wrong, who gets a point. And then obviously the highest points at the end of the season is the loser. And my idea for a forfeit is that the first show after the Super Bowl, the loser has to open with a monologue, which is on a topic of the 2 other hosts choosing. What are your thoughts on the competition that I've put together, Paul?
So I read that completely different. I obviously scanned over it earlier. I thought you meant open the show with a monologue about the 2 other co-hosts and how much you love them and everything like this, which actually sounds like a wicked idea, because I'd love for Hannah to come on here and tell us how much she loves me and you, and have an opening monologue about how awesome me and you are.
But we can still do that with this. If Hannah loses, which you probably won't, we can choose for it to be about how great we are. But we could also choose it for it to be about how, 4 seasons into the league, Joe Burrow probably isn't it, and the Bengals should look to draft a quarterback next year.
Oh, man. Do you know what? Because I know if I lose, you're all going to go, how bad Marvin Harrison Jr. is, and I've got to come on you and say that. And it makes me not want to do it, but the competitive side of me is like, let's do it.
Yeah, I think we go for it, and I think it's fun to be able to track midway through, and then it encourages people to. I mean, the only problem is the subjectivity of who is the most wrong. But definitely when we go into some and you go, I think this person's going to be a scare, and then there were the wide receiver 2 on the week, which all 3 of us had multiple times last season.
Yeah, we definitely did that so many times last year.
Yeah, I think it'll be a bit of fun. So let's crack on. Let's start with our studs. So Paul, who do you have for us as your fantasy stud for week 1?
So I put 2 down because I couldn't remember how deep we sort of wanted to go with this and stuff like that. So you can see both on the show sheet. Do you think the first one is a sort of under the radar player, or do you think maybe he's a little bit too high for this sort of segment?
I'm fine with the first one, because I think it's a nice range of someone who basically. So the only time I'll take an issue with the stud is where it's someone that actually, if you're saying Justin Jefferson, basically, I've got mine wrong on the show sheet, so I'm just doing some tinkering quickly.
Oh, okay, I was going to say it's all changing in front of me.
Yeah.
But yes, so I'll pick one, because if I pick two and one of them hits and one of them misses, then it's going to be, which one did you want? So I'll pick one, and I will say that I'll go for the second one, because I think Hannah's is a bit thing and yours is a bit further down. So I'll go for the second one. And my stud of the week this week is going to be Chuba Hubbard. He's going to get the running back work in with the Panthers, and with them saying that Jonathan Brooks is he's starting on PUP, isn't he? So he's not playing the first 4 games. He's definitely going to be somebody that they're going to use. They're going to use a lot over the first sort of 4 weeks. So I've just gone. I think the Panthers will maybe run the ball a bit. I think he's going to see plenty of volume, and I think if he scores a touchdown, he could be somebody that could jump quite high up into the running backs this week. And I think he's somebody that a lot of people probably haven't drafted, or people haven't picked him up in any leagues. He's probably like undrafted in a lot of leagues. So mine this week is going to be Chuba Hubbard.
I really like that one. He's someone definitely that I think, if we're targeting, we're as a community quite smart about the fact that you target Jonathan Brooks, you put him on IR, and then he can be a league winner later on in the season. But I don't think we're quite smart about the fact that means that someone else has to start in the interim. And Chuba Hubbard was actually quite good last season. In the work that he saw, because Miles Sanders obviously wasn't it, and Chuba Hubbard ended up being the starter, and he was pretty good value for money for it. So yeah, I quite like this one. Do you want to mention your other one, or do you want to just leave it at Hubbard?
I don't mind. I'm quite happy to mention the other one. So the other one I had was Jackson Smith and Jigba. As you all probably can understand, that he's not so much under the radar. But I think the Seahawks are playing the Denver Broncos this week, and I think that could potentially turn into a bit of a high-scoring game. I think both teams will be putting points on the board. I don't think either have got the best of defenses, and I think there'll be some points scored in that game. And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba's in for a great season. So, but I think I've gone for Hannah would definitely say you can't have Jackson Smith and Jigba, and she would be okay with Chuba Hubbard. So,
yeah.
She's the voice of reason, normally.
She is. We're spending a lot of time praising Hannah this episode. Let's sort of calm down on that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe we should rein it in.
Yeah, I have gone for a player that I actually don't particularly like as a fantasy option, but someone who I think is going to have a strong week 1, and that's Gardner Minshew against the Chargers. So the Chargers were actually the 7th worst team against quarterbacks from a fantasy perspective last season. And they haven't really done a huge amount in the secondary to change that. They've changed quite a significant amount of their roster, but they haven't, they're sort of in phase 1 of a rebuild. They decided to keep their edges rather than their wide receivers, but in the secondary, they haven't really managed to reassign a lot of that resource. And Gardner Minshew is a perfectly fine quarterback. He's not good, but he's, the 25th to 35th best quarterback in the NFL, which is fine. He's got decent weapons in front of him, and definitely better weapons in the receiving game in Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and then obviously the 2 tight ends in Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. Danny has in the run game with Zamir White. And I just think that actually in an in-division matchup, I was going to say for my wildcard of the week that the Raiders beat the Chargers by more than a touchdown, but actually I don't think that's that rogue. I think the Raiders are, a reasonably okay team, and I think the Chargers are going to struggle to start out the season. So I think Gardner Minshew, actually being quite a strong start if you're quarterback needy against the Chargers this week. I wouldn't want to rely on him all season long, but I definitely think this week could be someone of interest. What do you think to that shout?
Oh, I love it. I love it, to be fair. And I think Gardner Minshew has always been somebody that has turned up. And like you said, with the weapons in front of him, all you need is Devontae Adams. You know, I've recently just finished watching Receiver on Netflix, and like, you know, how everyone praises him and how good he is and what he can do. I think with a player like that on your team, as long as you're getting the ball to him, he's you know, you could be anything. And I love this pick. I don't think, you know, Gardner Minshew's a season long guy that I'd be keen for, but like we've always said, if you know, your first 4 games are some of the most important games that you will sort of play. If you can get off to that start where you start winning your first 4 games, you're in a great position to push towards the playoffs, and that's object one, you know. So I really like this pick. I really like this pick.
Lovely. And then from Hannah, we'll go straight from her stud into her scare because they're linked. And Hannah has Andre Yoshivas of the Bengals as her stud of the week. Who I wrote my first article for DLF this week about Jermaine Burton and about the fact that he has not managed to seek control of that wide receiver 3 spot that seems to be Yoshivas. Who was actually a very talented player in sort of limited snaps last season. And the reason that she's got Yoshivas as her stud of the week is because she has Jamar Chase as her scare of the week, who even today was being reported as not practicing. So he actually hasn't practiced in months due to a contract dispute, which is quite a difficult one for him because he is still a year away from needing to get paid. 2 years away from the expiry of his contract. So, you know, he doesn't need an extension yet, but he obviously wants one and is holding out. And the Patriots defense is quite strong as well. So I like having sort of, you know, it's like when you play in DFS with certain stacks that Hannah is telling a narrative with her stud and her scare. And I think it must be quite difficult for her to have one of her favorite players as her fancy scare of the week. But what do you think about you cover these two together? What do you think about having Yoshua as her stud and then Chase as her scare?
I get the logic behind it, and that's obviously what Hannah's gone for. She's gone for the fact that Jamar Chase hasn't trained, and the contract thing, and you know, the Patriots defense is really good. But I kind of sort of think it's Jamar Chase, man. You know,
I know it's really hard to bet against him.
But this is what we go for with the scare of the week. We try and go for these sort of top 12 players and go, I don't think they're going to be good, because, you know, we could all sit here, like you said, with the studs, we could all sit there and go, oh, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be pretty good this week. And then I also think that, you know, I'm just trying to think of a really, really bad player. I don't know, anyone really. Darnell Mooney. I don't think Darnell Mooney's going to be a good guy this week. And it's like, wow, you know, it's easy. So that's what we go for with this. And like you said, for Hannah to select Jamar Chase from her team, I think that obviously shows that she is worried, and she obviously listens to what goes on at the Bengals, and if she's worried, I'd sort of I'm going to agree with her, and I love it. But I think both of these are quite logical picks. I think they both make sense, and she's being sensible. Unlike me and you that are like, oh yeah, I think this guy's going to be amazing. You know, she's gone. This guy's probably not going to have the greatest game because he hasn't practiced. So my stud is going to be this guy that could benefit from him not having a great game. And we're like, yeah, let's chuck them all in the deep end, you know? So it's great. I love it.
Well, I quite like your scare of the week. And in terms of being a hyped up player that could be disappointing, this is definitely someone that's seen a huge amount of hype the last week, including from our own wildcard father, Kev, who on the TH Fancy Football My Guys episode listed Jaden Daniels. So yeah, why do you think he could potentially be a scare?
So I've gone off, you know, obviously he's not that, you know, like Hannah's gone for Jamar Chase, who is potentially drafted as like wide receiver 2 or something like that. You know, he's really high up. So, but I've gone for somebody. He's in the top 12. He was drafted. His ADP is QB 12. That's what he's going as. So I have gone for somebody like that. But I just think it's his first game in the NFL. We've all drafted him going, do you know what? He's a really good QB. He's got that rushing upside and everything like that. But it's, you know, it's one thing playing in a preseason game and you're not playing the better. When you get to week 1 and you're playing all the starters, and all of a sudden, all eyes are on you and everything like this. And I just think he's going to be one of them QBs that he's going to play, and he's probably not going to hit. And there's going to be that chance that he ends up as like QB sort of 26, 27 on the week, something like that.
Yeah.
And I just think everyone's, like you said, the hype around him and everyone's gone crazy for him. I'm not saying he's going to have a bad season and you're fools for drafting him, because I do think he'll have a good season. It's a rookie. It's week 1. Be mindful that it's not going to be his best game. He's not going to turn up. He's not going to rush for 100 yards, put 4 touchdowns on the board, finish as a QB1 or anything like that. So I've gone for a bit of a hype player he's not going to hit week 1,
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I definitely think so. To me, the Bucks are actually a defense that I'm targeting in leagues that I play in that still have defensive scoring. Not again, I love Jaden Daniels for fantasy this season. I definitely think he's a really strong pick. And just in terms of that rushing floor, but I think the problem with Jaden Daniels is always that he is incapable of sliding and doesn't seem to realize that he is slender, and that he's not built like Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson was incredibly injury prone last season because he wouldn't slide. So someone half the size of A-Rich is just going to get absolutely torn to shreds in the NFL. And so I think my issue with him is that it's going to take a little bit of a learning period. I think he's going to be a bit surprised when he gets that first hit. Especially if it's from Vita Vea, from all 350 pounds of Vita Vea on Sunday.
And I hope he shouts when he hits him. I hope he shouts like, "Welcome to the league," and he's like, oh, and it's just, but yeah. Sorry, carry on. Yeah, I just had to get that.
No, I think that welcome to the NFL moment is a proper thing, and I think that's going to happen for him. So yeah, like it's a scare that I really agree with actually. For week 1, I've gone for a slightly similar tactic.
Ridiculous.
And I've also slightly gone for this to bait you. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is potentially the best wide receiver prospect of all time. Okay, he's absolutely spectacular, and he is going to be a surefire thing in the league for a long time to come. I think he is being overdrafted this season, and he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 9, which is only a couple of spots lower than Puka Nacua finished last season.
Oh, sorry, I got a drink.
No, but this is a genuinely valid time to bring him up, right? So we saw Puka break rookie records last season, and he only finished a couple of spots over where Marvin Harrison is being drafted this season. So I think the problem is that you're sort of projecting he has to have the greatest rookie season of all time in order to repay that value. So I think having him as my fantasy scare of the week, this isn't saying that I don't think he's a good player, and I don't think he's probably going to have an all right first week, but very few rookies tend to come in and immediately dominate. The Bills secondary has gone through a lot of a rebuild, but is looking quite strong. And yes, there's not a huge amount of weapons outside of him. I just wouldn't be surprised to see him come in and still take a couple of weeks to get going. And the Cardinals often still sort of take a bit of time for the pieces to fall into place. So I don't think it's a case of going, I think he's going to be a bust. I think it's a case of going, why I'm scared of him for week 1 is that you will have drafted him as your wide receiver 1. So you will be starting him, and you can't really afford for him to not come out the gates incredibly hot. And I'm just not 100% sure that he's going to. I feel like I've managed to frame that in a friendly enough way that I've repeatedly said I think he's going to be amazing. I just would be scared of the cost and scared of him in week 1. What do you think about my selection? Are you furious? Are you resigning from the podcast?
I want to disagree with you. I want to sit here and go, Lewis, you're wrong. But we've probably reiterated this a lot. We're talking about week 1. Okay, we're not
Yeah.
talking about a dynasty pick. We're not talking about a season-long pick or anything like that. And we've said many a times a rookie wide receiver in redraft is a difficult pick. And I've actually said that on this show here. He is a difficult pick. You know, he is somebody that you sort of worry about and you go, do you know what? Like you said, he's got to have that record-breaking year to repay that value. And that's why I haven't got much of Marvin Harrison Jr. in redraft because of that reason. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say he won't break the record because I feel like he's a prospect that's somebody that could break the record. You know, he's a
Yeah.
good enough wide receiver. We've seen it many times now. We've seen Justin Jefferson come in. We saw that. What was that guy last year that did it? Can't remember his name.
No, it skips my mind as well.
Yeah. I'll find out later and I'll tweet it out or something. But you know, we've seen these players come in and they have been getting better. Wide receivers are getting better. They are hitting the ground running and stuff like that. But be cautious as it's week one. Don't expect him to come in, and you made this point as well. He has been drafted as your wide receiver one. You draft the people in the first couple of rounds, you're going to start them every week. You're going to start Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. There's not many people that are going to go, I'm going to put him on my bench and start, I don't know, a wide receiver that I took in round 12. You know, there's not many people that will do that. You've drafted him to be a wide receiver one, play him, but be wary that he's probably not going to be somebody on the level of like, you know, or like
AJ
Justin
Brown, Garrett
Jefferson
Wilson,
or
that sort of level. Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb, Amon Ra. That he's not going to come out and go. You watch now; he'll put up 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But be cautious. So I love it as a scare, and I think you've done the same thing that I've done. We've gone for them hyped players that were drafted early. You've drafted them at their ceiling, and you know you have with Marvin Harrison Jr. You've drafted him at his ceiling, and you've got to be cautious of that week one.
So as just a little bit of an example here, Justin Jefferson in his rookie season finished as the wide receiver 6 overall, right? And he was similar to Puka, he was being drafted a lot lower than that. How many points do you think he got in PPR leagues in week 1?
6.
4.6. How many points do you think he got in week 2?
6.
7.4. And then week 3, 30.5, right? And then he only had 2 more games under 10 points for the rest of the season. The point there is that, Marvin Harrison Jr., can have a really strong season without having a really strong week 1. And I just think, I'm scared about it. But let's close off with our wild card of the week. So as we said, this is where we're suggesting something we think could happen. The less likely it is, the better. Do you want to start us off, Paul? Because Hannah has done a almost a reaction to yours in hers.
Yeah, I don't get her reaction, but we'll go with it. So I've gone for 2. I've gone for 1 for fantasy and 1 for as a normal NFL. My normal NFL one, I'll start with that one, is I think all of our teams win week 1. I think the Rams win, the Cardinals win, and the Bengals win. The Rams played the Lions, the Cardinals played the Bills, and the Bengals play. Oh, it's gone from me. I've seen it earlier as well.
Genuinely can't remember.
New England. New England.
Patriots.
So I think all 3 of our teams come out with a win in week 1. So that's my normal NFL one. And for fantasy, I'm predicting, and it's probably completely against my scare of the week, but I think Caleb Williams finishes the week as the highest scoring QB, and the Chicago Bears play the Tennessee Titans, and I think the Titans are a bit lost at the moment and not really the best of teams, and I think that Caleb Williams comes out and goes, this is why I was number 1 overall. So
I really like that, and actually mine is sort of the opposite to yours as well, a reaction to yours. I like the matchup for Caleb against the Titans, like I do like for fantasy, but I've sort of gone on a running theme with the Marvin Harrison Jr. thing or with the Jaden Daniels thing, that my wild card of the week is that all three of the rookie quarterbacks who are going to start immediately are going to lose. So that's Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Bo Nix. So Caleb, obviously. Christ, who did you? Oh, yeah, Caleb obviously playing the Titans. I just forgot immediately who they were playing. Jaden Daniels playing the Bucks and Bo Nix playing the Seahawks. My wildcard is that all three of them lose week one out the gate. I like Caleb Williams. I really like this season. I think this is just a week one rookie thing. In terms of what like the all our teams, yeah. In terms of the all our teams winning week one, the one that I'm the most frightened about is the Rams against the Lions. I'm not very in on the Bills this year. Obviously, they have Josh Allen, but everything around him is not fantastic. But the Rams versus the Lions was such a close matchup last time out, and I'm a little worried about that one.
I think that's the game that I'd be targeting this week with sort of like DFS and stuff like that. I think that would be the one I'd be looking at.
Yeah, I think there's a world in which, so I have a lot of, yes, you can have, I think it's four fingers for this one. I have a lot of teams where I have both Puka and Cooper Cup. I'm so glad that's a squash and you're not necking pints right before going to sleep and going to work. Yeah, I have lots of teams where I have both of them, and this is definitely one of those matchups where I'd be perfectly happy starting both of them, dependent on Puka's health, because I think it's going to be very high scoring. But yes, let's close out with Hannah's. So Hannah has, I'm presuming Voldemort is Deshaun Watson. I'm presuming that's who she's going with there.
Yeah, Lord Voldemort himself.
Yeah, Hannah
as
has
nicknamed when I think Mags was on the show when we dubbed him Lord Voldemort.
Hannah has Deshaun Watson finishing as the QB1, which she's made a point in the show sheet of saying that's a better prediction than Paul's quarterback one, which feels very targeted. And then the other targeted bit is that she said all teams in the NFC West lose, which is obviously the Rams, which is my Rams, the Cardinals, Paul's Cardinals, the Seahawks against the Broncos, and the 49ers against the Jets. The fun one with our predictions here is that they are all very much interlinked. So we can't all be right with everything. I've said the rookie quarterbacks lose their opening matchup. You've said Caleb is the highest scoring quarterback on the week. I guess he could be the highest scoring quarterback in a loss, but it seems unlikely. Then Hannah said Deshaun Watson's the QB1, whereas you've said Caleb Williams is a QB1. Hannah said all of the teams in the NFC West lose, and you've said all of our teams win. So yeah, we actually can't in this one all be right in our wild card of the weeks, although it's more likely that we're all wrong.
Yeah, it's do you know what? I'm just going to take a minute here, and we've been really nice to Hannah the whole show, and we've praised her. And I even what I learned last year is listen to Hannah because she's 9 times out of 10 she's right. And then we've been super nice, and we've not criticized any of her picks. Her scare and her stud, everything like that. They're logical. We praised her for that. And then she goes on the wild card of the week and literally goes, all NFC teams lose. And then criticizes my picks. So do you know what, Hannah? I hope the Bengals lose. I hope Jamar Chase doesn't play this season. And I hope that Joe Burrow's shit. I don't, because I've got him in so many leagues. I hope he's amazing.
On that note, that'll bring our show to an end.
We love you, really.
It's such a joy to be back. It's such a joy to be back, and I can't wait to rewind week one with you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed, please go and follow us on X at Wildcard Rewind. Do you know what? Even if you haven't enjoyed, go and follow us on Twitter. Head on over to our YouTube channel, search for us at Fancy Wildcard, and make sure you give us a subscribe. And we will see you guys next week, where we will be rewinding week one and looking forward to week 2 enjoy football this weekend, guys. We will see you next week.
Take me back to the start.